aptum dhananjaya. My dear Arjun, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, you will develop a desire to attain me. Text 10. Abhyasebhya samarthosi matkarma paramo bhava madharthamapi karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. Text 11. Adhai tarapya shakthosi karto madhyogam ashritaha sarva karma phalathyagam tatha kuru yathatmavan. If, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness, then try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. Text 12. Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasas jnana dhyanam vishishyate dhyanat karma phala tyagas tyagats chantiranantaram. If you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation, and better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. That was the last one, or? Okay, then we'll go back to text numero dos, number 2. You wanna read for us, Jagannath Prabhu? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Mai Aveshamano Yimam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shriya Paryopetas Teme Yuktama Mataha. Translation and purport. The Blessed Lord said, "He whose mind is fixed on my personal form, always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith, is considered by me to be most perfect." Purport. In answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one in such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done by Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, or sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to the marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is in full samadhi. Any realizations? Any comments? Any questions? I do have a question. I think it's in text 12 of chapter 12. Oh yeah. So how does renunciation of the fruits of action give us peace of mind? How does renunciation, the fruits of action, give us peace of mind? Yeah. Well, what does it say there in text 12? It says, if you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation, and better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. Trying to see if Srila Prabhupada mentions this point in the purport. But basically, Everybody's working for some result. So we're working for something. So in the previous text, text 11, Krishna, he says, however, if you're unable to work in this consciousness, then try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. So instead of endlessly working and pursuing different matters and means and thinking, you know, I'm working hard for this result to get this, to get that, you become renounced from that and you just become grateful, like self-satisfied with whatever position you have in life and whatever the Lord brings you. So you do your work focusing on the higher goal, but you're not entangled in your work because you're thinking that you're entitled to the fruits of your work. But when we think that the fruits of the work, I did this much work, you know, I deserve this much money, I deserve this much fame, I deserve this, I deserve that. Says who? But, you know, this is how we operate from a conditional perspective. So you'll never be satisfied because it's never enough. It's never enough. You always want more. And if you are satisfied, it's temporary and it comes and goes. You know, but if you learn to be renounced from that and just satisfied with whatever comes, that's peacefulness. Otherwise, your mind is always agitated. On the first page, I have a different. Mm. I'll read it. But in all cases, one should give up the result or fruits of labor. This means to employ the result of karma for some good cause. In summary, to reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the highest goal, there are two processes. One process is by gradual development, and the other process is direct. So then he goes to talk about devotional service. And this is the part. I'm trying to see where Krishna says it. It may be after this text that we just read. I'm struggling to find the text and the shloka, the purports that I want, but yeah, this what Prabhu just pointed out is very good because Prabhupada talks about employing the result of our karma for some good cause. And in this series of texts, Krishna is giving a variety of options, starting with the first text where he said, those who, no, text 6 and 7. The one who worships me, giving up all his activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, who has fixed his mind upon me, O son of Pritha, for him I am the swift deliverer from an ocean of birth and death. So this is the goal. This is what we want, because if you're able to do this, then Krishna is promising that he will very quickly deliver us from this samsara, this cycle of being stuck in the material world. And then Krishna delineates, if you can't do that, do this. He specifically says, if you can't do that, then fix your mind upon me and engage your intelligence in me. And if you can't do that, try to follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga. And if you can't do that, then just try to work for him. And if you can't do that, try to renounce the fruits of your work. And if you can't do that, practice cultivating knowledge, meditation, and this renunciation. And then in one of these purports, Prabhupada actually expands upon this point that we just heard in this sentence, where he essentially advocates for charity, like worldly causes, like altruism. And, you read the Bhagavad-Gita and, if you read it out of context, just this one purport, it's like, what? Prabhupada's talking about it's good to do charity for the world. But you read the whole rest of the Bhagavad-Gita and he's saying, no, don't do charity. It's a waste. Just do service for Krishna. But the whole point is to gradually free us from our bondage, our conditioning of this material world, so then we can come to a higher state so we can understand Krishna's message. So I was just reflecting how, I think last week I was giving class and the question came up about, how do we see where we're at? How do we be real with where we're at, but also keep our eyes on the goal, essentially? And this is a very good portion of the Bhagavad Gita to see that, because Krishna is saying what the highest standard is, and he gives lower standards. And, from my personal experience, first reading the Bhagavad Gita, being so fired up, it's like, yeah, that's me. I'm always going to worship. Swiftly deliver me. But then sometimes more of the conditioned nature comes up and devotional service is a little bit more tough. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to try to work for Krishna. And I have faith that if I do work for Krishna, then I'll become purified. And then as we get purified, we come to that higher platform. So we can see where we're at, what tendencies we have, and always be working in the right direction towards what Krishna says, always worshiping him, give up all your activities to him. Then Prabhupada in that purport we just read, is talking about a pure devotee never wastes a single moment. It's always using every single moment in Krishna's service. This is good. We can see that this is a symptom of a pure devotee, is that they seriously value time. They understand that wasting time is offensive to Krishna. And this is why pure devotees, naturally a result is to minimize sleeping and eating and mating and all these activities, because it takes away time. If I want to chant 64 rounds or more a day, it requires a certain level of renunciation to be able to achieve that. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he made a vow to chant 1 billion names. So he went to Yoga Pit. You know where Yoga Pit is? This is a place where Lord Chaitanya appeared in Mayapur, in Navadvip. Now they have a big Gaudiya Math temple property there. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he went there and he was living in a little hut and he would chant Shri Shri Gaura Nitai Ki Jai. He would chant 300,000 names a day, 3 lakhs names, which is like about 192 rounds, if you do the math. And in Navadvip, in the monsoon season, they get serious storms, like serious clouds, serious rain, downpour for days. And he was staying in this little hut and, there's holes in the roof. And at one point, water is just like torrenting down. And, he basically, imagine us in that situation. It's like, okay, I got to fix this because if not, all this is going to get ruined. And this is how am I going to sleep? How am I going to do any of this? But then he wouldn't be able to fulfill his vow of chanting this many names. So what did he do? He just grabbed an umbrella and kept chanting japa. So the point that I'm trying to make is to have these vows, of if I want to read 2 or 3 hours a day, if I want to chant 64 rounds even or more a day, it requires a certain level of renunciation to be able to achieve that. Otherwise, if I'm just kind of walking here, having fun, I talk to this person, I spend an hour taking prasadam, I do this, I do that. And the things I mentioned could be totally connected in devotional service. It's not wrong. But my point is that if you make these serious vows to do something serious, you're juxtaposed with time. You begin to see how time is an impediment, that it's always ticking, it's never stopping. We can't buy back time. So the devotee always strives to become more efficient and not wasting time. And we may not be at this platform a pure devotional service where we're engaging every single second in Krishna service. But it's good to be aware of where our shortcomings are and plan to make adjustments so we can come to a higher standard. Now, there's always a higher standard that we could come to, and we could see our acharyas. They're in the highest of all standards, but if you were to sit and talk to them, they would genuinely tell you that I'm very low. I'm at a low standard. And what comes to my mind is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was very, very rigid in his schedule. He would get like 3 hours of sleep. He would wake up. He would, I believe, write for a couple hours, and then he would chant japa. And then, we could look up and see his actual schedule, but he would write for a few hours. He would chant japa. Then he would go to work. He would come home for a break, and then rest, and then go back to work, and then he'd come back and chant more and read and study and translate, and he'd do the same thing every day, eat the same thing every day, really perfecting a schedule to do as much as he could. And he was working also. No, he was working as a magistrate in the British government. You know what that means? Not exactly the judge, but kind of like a deputy of the judge, you could say. Working on the court's behalf and going in to investigate and clear up certain cases. But the point is, he was always busy. But, he didn't waste a single moment. And none of our acharyas did. Srila Prabhupada. And he came here when he's 69 years old. And knew nobody, but he always had this vision that this movement was going to spread, it was going to take off, and he didn't let anybody get in the way of that. All right, is there any other comments or thoughts or questions or doubts? Conversation pieces? Yes.
So in the purport, I was reading a little bit while you were speaking. I'm sorry about that. But it says here the direct process is not possible for everyone. So what does Prabhupada mean by that?
Which text?
Same text, 12.
Well,
it's right.
Prabhupada said, based on this of what Krishna is saying, you could see people of other faiths or other religions, they want to jam their ideology down your throat into your life. If you don't accept this, you're going to hell. Krishna never says this. What does Krishna say? He says, give up everything and surrender unto me. But if you can't do that, follow these principles. If you can't do that, work for me. If you can't do that, practice this, practice that. So Krishna is saying, that not everybody is at that platform to fully surrender unto him. So if we're not there, it's okay. It's totally okay. But we should always strive to work in the right direction. And as you progress into a higher platform of this process that Krishna is describing, then you realize how the lower platforms are there's a lot more room for more suffering, more agitation. Krishna, he says, I think we just read it. Yeah, he says in text 5, for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always very difficult for those who are embodied. So just by hearing Krishna and thinking of Krishna and meditating on Krishna, Krishna is a person. He has a certain desire, a certain will. He has feelings. He's sentient. There's a certain way to approach him and please him. So if we just hear from him and follow that, then life will be smooth. But we might not be able to do that for whatever reason. We're all conditioned and we all have many attachments to this material world, to our false ego. So we pick up where we can and continue on and strive for the highest platform. And Krishna, he says, Tesham sarata yuktanam vachitam pratipurvikam tadami buddhiyogam tam yenamam ubiyanti te. He's dwelling within the heart. And to the sincere devotee who's striving to serve him, he guides him in what direction to go. So, Krishna, he says certain things, but there's certain underlying principles where he says, Man manabhava mad bhakto madhyashimam namaskuru mami vaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. He says the same thing earlier in the Bhagavad-Gita, slightly differently, but same meaning. Just give your mind to me. Just worship me. Just become dear to me. Surely you'll come to me. And then ultimately, sarvadharmam parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja ham tvam sarvapapibhyo mokshayishyami masacha. Just abandon all other varieties of dharma, all other duties you may have, and just surrender unto me. I'll protect you. So that's the conclusion. But we may not have that conclusion. But as we read in where is it, text 12 or no, text 10. If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. So by working for Krishna, by coming in contact with Krishna, we'll become purified. So there's the example given that when you take an iron rod and you stick it in fire, naturally the iron, it'll start glowing like fire. So this is Bhakti Yoga. We need to stay in the fire. Because when we stay in the fire, we become pure and we pick up the same propensity as the fire. So when we're doing service for Krishna, when we're associating with Krishna, Krishna is Satchidananda. So then naturally we imbibe this too. Krishna is the source of reality. So then we're connected with reality. But when we turn away from Krishna, so many distractions. These distractions lead to suffering. Earlier in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna, he says, Vyavisadmika buddhir ekeha kurinandana bahushakha yanantascha. Ooh, I forget the last line. Buddha vyavisadmika. I don't know. Something like that. Anyways, one who's on this path is one-pointed in attention, and one who's not, their knowledge is many-branched. So as we practice and we learn and we realize, oh, when I give to Krishna, I get free from all of my desires, my attachment, lust becomes mitigated. I can have a glimpse into reality of seeing that I'm spiritual, that I'm not this physical body. Life is blissful and purposeful, and I could see that others are suffering. And the more that we give to Krishna, the more these things become prevalent, and then the more you get a taste, and the more and more and more you want to give to Krishna. What is it? What's that? I forget the shloka. There's the shloka talking about the higher taste. It ends, Param Drishva Nivartate.
I was just, there's a comment on here from a devotee about that chapter 18, text 63. Thus I have explained.
Chapter what?
18, text 63.
Okay.
Is something to ponder. So just wanted to relay that comment.
Text 63. Thus I have explained to you the most confidential of all knowledge. Deliberate on this fully, and then do what you wish to do. Yes, exactly. Krishna never says you have to do this. He gives all the knowledge of why you want to, why you should, and what you should do, but he never says you have to do this. Every time I see this verse, I always mention that the first time when I read the Bhagavad-Gita, that shloka by far stood out to me the most. that was my favorite part of the Bhagavad-Gita. Because you're reading all this transcendental knowledge, and Krishna says, yeah, there it is. Do whatever you want. Do you want to suffer and be in Maya? Or do you want, eternal, blissful, purposeful, spiritual life? So that's just a few thoughts and rambles on your point that you mentioned. Is there any other things that anybody wants to discuss? Questions? Comments? Yes.
I had a comment. I just wanted to say that I liked what you said about how the devotee he naturally wants to give more and more to Krishna. I can't remember exactly what you said, but I just like that point. It was a really nice point.
No, this is the essence of spiritual life. You give to Krishna, Krishna becomes pleased, Krishna gives you mercy. You get mercy, you feel grateful, and you want to give more to Krishna. So then Krishna wants to give more to you. And then you want to give more to Krishna, and Krishna wants to give more to you. And, what we can experience of this is very minute. But the grand example of this is Srimati Radharani, who's always fixed and thinking of Krishna, always fixed in serving Krishna and loving Krishna. And Krishna can't even repay her or any of the other gopis because they're so fully absorbed in Krishna. So I forget where I heard it mentioned, but Krishna essentially told the gopis that I can't repay you, but let your service to me be the repayment in its own self. So that service is infinite. So you always give to Krishna and he's always pleased and he gives you more. So we may not be able to do that. So we need the blessings. And how do we get the blessings? By serving, essentially is the best way. And we may not be qualified to serve Krishna or Srimati Radharani. But Krishna comes in the form of the Guru. So we can render service to the Guru. And by serving the Guru, who is spending his whole life to act in a way that's according to the Shastra and to the accordance of his spiritual master and the accordance of the super soul or Krishna within, then by serving that qualified person, we naturally please Krishna. Krishna, he says, one who considers himself a devotee of myself is not actually my devotee. But one who considers himself a devotee of my devotee, that's really my devotee. And Lord Chaitanya, he also said, I don't consider myself sannyas, brahmachari, any of these designations of vanaprast, of the varnashram or material order. I'm not man, I'm not woman. Das anudas anudas. Servant of the servant of the servant. 100 times removed. So this should be our only ambition in life, actually, is to become the servant of the servant of the servant of a Vaishnava. And even if it's 1,000 times removed from Krishna, 1,000,000 times removed from Krishna, or this Vaishnava that we're serving, he may not have so many material results, you could say. Meaning, he may not have so many disciples, or he may not be able to lead really rocking kirtans or give classes all the time. But if his Vaishnava is fixed in his dedication and determination in serving Srila Prabhupada, in serving and chanting the holy name, in being free from finding faults with others, and always trying to lift others up to higher platforms of devotional service, then we should endeavor like anything to serve his personality. And if we don't, we should take a good look at ourselves. Do we have these qualities? Am I completely fixed in faith and devotion to Srila Prabhupada, to the Acharyas, Of course, it's easy to say, yeah, but really, where are we at? We can talk with other sadhus, and it's probably the best way to reveal where we're at. Because we could read the books and take away things that we want, but if we take them as a whole, there's a certain process to follow. And if we follow the process as it is, we can see how we're making advancement. And similarly, we should see how we're not making advancement. If we're practicing for years and we're kind of stagnant and not making progress, this should be a red flag. This should be something we should be aware of. And we need to make corrections, adjustments, because actually this process of purification should be very fast. But it's only due to our offensive nature that it's very slow.
I was just gonna say that recognizing where you're at can be very painful. At least for me, it's been, or mentally painful, mental anguish about recognizing where you're at. And then I have a question: is knowledge of something? Do you actually know something, if especially about spiritual life, if you're not able to do it? Like, say you know about something, but you're not able to do that. Do you actually know that thing?
Well, there's a distinction between jnana and vijnana. So you know it in theory, but you don't have practical realization of it. Just like right now, I tell you, Prabhu, you're not your body. And you just fell down the stairs and twisted your ankle. I'm like, okay, I'm not my body, but this still hurts, So you have the knowledge in theory, but you don't have the practical knowledge. Because if you practically realize I'm not my body, then whatever pain or whatever comes, what does it have to do with me? So yeah, we have knowledge, and we might not be able to live up to that. It's good because we need to cultivate this knowledge. But we can't just read a book and get this vijnana. We actually have to practice it and apply it. And then by applying it, then we can develop this vijnana, this transcendental realization of it. It's like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he describes the processes of devotional service from Shraddha to Prem. So it starts with Shraddha, which is faith, which Prabhupada also describes Shraddha as hearing, because to hear from somebody requires faith. You meet somebody on Harinam or whatever, and if they hear from you, they got a tiny little bit of faith. Okay, let me hear what this person has to say. Now, what they do from that, that's a different matter. But the point being is, after Shraddha comes Sadhu Sangha, and Sadhu Sangha, they teach you how to perform devotional service, Bhajana Kriya. So then by Bhajana Kriya, you're actually engaging in devotional service. You're acquiring transcendental realization. Because, Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojeta Janyatya Shivairagam Jnanam Shiyadahaitukam. By rendering devotional service to Lord Vasudeva, one gets causeless transcendental knowledge and detachment of the world. So by rendering this devotional service, by applying what we're hearing, you get realization, which leads one to anartha nivritti, which is what you mentioned before your question, is that it's difficult to see where I'm at. It's tough looking in the mirror sometimes. We hear Chetadarpana Marjanam, how this cleansing of the mirror of the mind, of the heart. It sounds good. It sounds really pretty, like a beautiful analogy. Like, oh, wow, we're going to start doing this and we're going to clean it. And then it's going to be nice. You could see through it. But in reality, you start cleaning it and you start seeing yourself for what you really are from a lesser perspective. from a higher perspective, we're spiritual beings, we're pure, we have nothing to do with the material world, but we're not there and we can't just leapfrog there. So then we have to see, oh, yes, I do have lust and envy, greed, anger. All these things are there. I was talking to this Prabhu who comes on Sunday and was talking about how he works a job, which I thought's scary. But yeah, we were talking, and basically I was pointing out how it can be difficult for us Westerners preaching to like an Indian congregation per se, because seemingly they have more of a pious background. And we may talk about how, our mind is so disturbed from lust or, anger, all these things. And they might not be able to relate to it as much because somebody who's more in sattva guna, they have a different slew of problems in the material world. But when I was talking to him, he was mentioning some things that his coworkers did or said. And basically the point that came up is that, we all have these problems, like especially Westerners in America, but it's all buried so deep. All our anxiety, our fear, our insecurities. Everybody's in anxiety and depression like crazy, like anything. But if you go out and talk to them, they might not be willing to admit it, or they might not even be connected with it because, they're busy smoking so much to distract themselves. Or, they go see 3 movies every weekend to, load their mind with, all these different ideas or whatever it may be. Everybody has crutches they lean on in the material world to take shelter of because the material world's full of suffering. So if you're just not engaged in service, you have to get intoxicated one way or the other. You either have to get some nectar, some bliss from rendering service in Krishna consciousness, or you're going to look for that in the material world. So everybody's doing that because they're unaware of this, and then they're disconnected with where they're really at. So then as one takes up the process of devotional service, Krishna, he mentioned, if you can't just think of me and give everything to me and worship me, then try to follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga. So as we're endeavoring to render service to Krishna while following the principles of Bhakti Yoga, from time to time, we'll see our conditioned nature really spark up, and we might have bouts of depression or anger or lust. We shouldn't get disturbed because we've been in the material world for so long. We've been identifying with this subtle body, this false ego. If we can see beyond that, then these things don't affect us. I was hearing recently, was discussing about pain. What is pain? Like you mentioned the point that I mentioned about jnana and vijnana, knowledge and realized knowledge. It's like pain to one person could be horrible, but that same feeling to another person could be deemed pleasurable. It's all a perspective of a certain feeling, that how we're processing it. But what we view as pain, if I have a pain or something afflicting my body and I become disturbed and worried, it's because I'm attached to the body and the result that comes along with it. Whereas if I'm unattached to it, like if somebody came and broke this thing in half right here, I'd be upset because we use it in service to like talk on the microphone, but otherwise I don't associate with it. I don't feel any pain. Just go get a new one. But if somebody comes and breaks my arm, I'm very upset. I'm very worried because, I have to use my arm to do this. I have to use it to do this. This is part of me. This is part of my body. And the example that I heard was that, imagine you're I was going to say at a restaurant, but It's not good as devotees. Imagine you're at a big kirtan festival, and everybody's in there chanting and dancing, fired up, and somebody comes in and they start reading the license plate of your car. And they say, this car is getting towed right now. It's on the back of the tow truck. Somebody needs to run outside and stop it right now. And you're like, Krishna, Krishna, and you run outside. And then right as you start running outside, they're like, oh, Prabhu, sorry. We got the middle number wrong. It's this number. And you're like, oh, not my car. Not worried. So similarly, we identify with the body, and not just the body, the subtle body, which is my feelings, my thoughts, my desires, my relationships, all these different things of who we think we are. We identify with these too closely. So then when something comes to, poke at it, then we feel some way. I feel anxious. I feel angry. I feel depressed. I feel sad. I feel happy. But it's because we're identifying with the material body, which is not just this gross body. One could even say, more importantly, the subtle body. Krishna, he says that the subtle body is carrying us from one body to the next, just as wind is carrying aroma in the air. So we hear over and over, I'm not my body, I'm not my body, you're not your body. But it's not just the material body, it's also the subtle body. Our emotions and our feelings that are shaped because I was raised in a certain way in this family, and I went to second grade and my teacher taught me this thing. Now we might not be so connected with it, but all these samskaras that we had in our life shaped who we think we are now. From a higher perspective, this isn't us actually at all. So the more that we're closely associated with this ideology of das and a das and a das, the more that we're connected with reality. And the more we're thinking anything other than that, this is Maya. But, like I mentioned, we can't just leapfrog and come to this platform. Okay, I'm not my body. Okay, it's like 105 degrees. Let me go distribute books for like 12 hours in the sunlight. I'm not my body. I'll be okay. It's like, I might not be able to do that. If you can, that's awesome. But that's what Krishna's saying here is wherever you're at, work in this way. And he gives this whole process so you can see, okay, if I can't do that, then I'm here and I'll do this, but I know that this part is better than this part. So we always strive to read it one more time. The one who worships me, giving up all his activities unto me, being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, who is his mind fixed upon me, O son of Pratap, for him I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So that's always what we strive for. But if we're not there, we're not there. Just keep serving Krishna. Keep hearing, keep chanting with faith, and very importantly, try to rid ourselves of these offenses. Offenses to the holy name, offenses to other Vaishnavas, offenses during seva. One last point about this aparad is that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that, for instance, if we read in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami, he writes there's 64 major offenses within the temple. There's other offenses within Seva Aparad. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was saying that if we come to the temple and I unknowingly commit offenses, like I'm trying to think of an example. One says like you shouldn't come to the temple after this many days after somebody in your family's passed away, or you shouldn't come to the temple after visiting a crematorium, or there's other things. You can pick any one of them. If we commit these offenses unknowingly, then there's no harm, because if you're sincerely engaged in hearing and chanting, then the hearing and chanting will instantly cleanse us of all these offenses. But if we know them to be offenses, then we should strive to stay away from them. But the point that he was making was that offenses against the holy name, that's really what needs to be avoided in Vaishnava aparadh. Because if we're chanting the holy name and we're still committing offenses, we could go on for lifetimes and lifetimes chanting Hare Krishna and not having Krishna come to be our swift deliverer of birth and death. In one way, Krishna is always the swift deliverer, because from our perspective, it seems like, oh, there's lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. But all these lifetimes is just like, a few minutes of Brahma's life. So what to speak of Krishna, the spiritual world, which is beyond time. But to be free from offenses, it's something good to read regularly, to discuss regularly, to meditate on regularly. Yeah, very, very important, because, we spend how much time chanting Hare Krishna every day? 3 hours, 3.5 hours every day, 4 hours. That's a big part of our life. And the more that we put intent focus on chanting, Krishna will really come into your life. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for hearing the Srimad Bhagavad-Gita as it is. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gaura ki jai. Panchakapatarubhishcha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah.